Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that on February 5th, 2026, the Office of Personnel Management finalized regulations that will strip civil service protections from an estimated 50,000 federal employees, transforming them into at-will workers who can be fired without appeal rights or due process in what represents the most significant dismantling of merit-based government employment in over 140 years? And what if I told you that this systematic destruction of the professional civil service represents not just a policy change, but a fundamental transformation of American governance from public service based on expertise and competence to a loyalty apparatus designed to serve presidential preferences rather than constitutional obligations? The final rule, establishing what the administration calls schedule policy career, becomes effective on March 8, 2026, giving federal agencies and employees less than 3 weeks to prepare for the most dramatic restructuring of government employment since the Civil Service Act of 1883. This regulation, developed in secret and rushed through implementation despite overwhelming public opposition, eliminates protections that have ensured federal workers serve the American people rather than partisan political interests for nearly a century and a half. The scope of this transformation cannot be overstated. The Office of Personnel Management estimates that 50,000 federal employees will lose their civil service protections and become effectively at-will employees, subject to dismissal at presidential discretion. These are not political appointees or senior executives, but career professionals in positions deemed by the Trump administration to have policy influence, a designation so broad it could encompass virtually any federal employee whose work touches on government operations, regulatory enforcement, or program implementation. The public response to this proposal revealed the depth of opposition from federal employees, unions, and governance experts who understand the implications of politicizing the civil service. During the required public comment period, the Office of Personnel Management received over 40,000 comments, with 94% opposing the rule. This overwhelming rejection included detailed legal analyses, constitutional objections, and warnings from former government officials about the damage to democratic governance that would result from subordinating professional expertise to political loyalty. The Trump administration dismissed this opposition as misunderstanding the law and the intentions behind schedule policy career. OPM Director Scott Cooper insisted that the changes were not about political appointments or terminations, but rather about improving accountability and performance management. However, the structure of the regulation contradicts these assurances by removing precisely the protections designed to prevent political retaliation and ensure that hiring and firing decisions are based on merit rather than ideology. The mechanics of schedule policy career reveal its true purpose as a loyalty enforcement mechanism. Employees converted to this classification lose their right to appeal adverse personnel actions to the Merit Systems Protection Board, an independent agency established to ensure that personnel decisions follow legal procedures and merit-based criteria. Instead, appeals from schedule policy career employees will be handled by agency general counsel offices that report directly to political appointees, eliminating independent oversight of personnel decisions. The regulation also strips converted employees of access to student loan repayment programs, recruitment and retention incentives, and eligibility for performance awards. These benefit eliminations serve no legitimate management purpose, but function as economic penalties designed to discourage federal employment among those who might prioritize professional standards over political compliance. The message is clear. Federal employment will become attractive only to those willing to subordinate professional judgment to presidential preferences. The constitutional implications of this systematic assault on civil service protections extend far beyond employment policy into fundamental questions about the separation of powers and democratic governance. The civil service system was established specifically to ensure that federal agencies could operate based on law and expertise rather than political pressure. By converting tens of thousands of career positions into loyalty-dependent jobs, the Trump administration is attempting to transform the executive branch from a professional bureaucracy into a personal political apparatus. The legal challenges to schedule policy career have begun even before its implementation, with the American Federation of Government Employees, the AFL-CIO, and other major unions coordinating lawsuits that challenge both the substance and process of the regulation. These legal challenges argue that the administration violated the Administrative Procedure Act by rushing implementation without proper consideration of public comments, that the regulation exceeds presidential authority under existing civil service law, and that converting career positions into political positions violates constitutional principles of democratic governance. The historical precedent for these challenges is strong. Previous attempts to politicize the civil service from the spoils system of the 19th century to more recent efforts to circumvent merit-based hiring have been struck down by federal courts that recognize the importance of professional competence in government operations. However, The scale and systematic nature of schedule policy, career, represents an unprecedented attack on civil service independence that may require new legal frameworks to address. The practical consequences of implementing schedule policy, career, will extend far beyond the 50,000 employees directly affected. The threat of arbitrary dismissal will create a culture of fear and political conformity throughout the federal workforce, as even employees who retain civil service protections recognize that their positions could be redesignated at any time. This chilling effect will discourage independent thinking, professional judgment, and objective analysis that effective governance requires. The impact on federal agencies' ability to fulfill their missions will be severe and immediate. Regulatory agencies that depend on scientific expertise will find it difficult to maintain professional standards when employees know that contradicting political preferences could result in immediate termination. Law enforcement agencies will face pressure to prioritize political considerations over legal requirements. Intelligence agencies will struggle to provide objective analysis when analysts fear retaliation for inconvenient findings. The international implications of systematically politicizing the American civil service are equally troubling. Allied nations depend on the United States to maintain professional diplomatic, intelligence, and regulatory relationships that transcend political changes. When foreign governments can no longer trust that American commitments are based on institutional continuity rather than personal loyalty to a president, the foundations of international cooperation begin to erode. The timing of schedule policy career implementation reveals the administration is understanding that this transformation must occur rapidly to prevent organized resistance. By providing less than a month between final rule publication and implementation, the administration hopes to present opponents with a fait accompli that becomes difficult to reverse. Federal unions and employee organizations are struggling to coordinate legal challenges while simultaneously preparing their members for possible mass dismissals. The economic consequences of schedule policy, career, extend beyond direct employment effects to broader questions about government efficiency and effectiveness. Professional civil service systems exist because merit-based hiring and promotion produce better results than political patronage systems. When government positions are filled based on loyalty rather than competence, the quality of government services inevitably declines, while costs increase due to inefficiency and corruption. The precedent established by schedule policy career creates a template for future administrations to systematically eliminate civil service protections across the federal government. If 50,000 positions can be converted to at-will employment through administrative regulation, there's no legal barrier preventing future presidents from converting hundreds of thousands or millions of federal positions into political appointments. The civil service system that has served American democracy for over a century could be eliminated entirely through administrative actions. The response from Congress has been largely partisan, with Democratic legislators denouncing schedule policy career as an assault on democratic governance, while most Republicans support the administration, its efforts to increase presidential control over the federal workforce. However, some Republican legislators from districts with large federal employee populations have expressed concerns about the economic impact on their constituents, suggesting that political support may erode as consequences become apparent. The federal employee unions representing affected workers have coordinated their response around both legal challenges and public education campaigns designed to inform Americans about the consequences of politicizing government operations. These campaigns emphasize that schedule policy career threatens not just federal employees, but all Americans who depend on government services, from Social Security Administration to food safety inspection to environmental protection enforcement. Friends, what we are witnessing is not merely a change in personnel policy, but a systematic attempt to transform American governance from a professional system based on expertise and legal compliance into a personal loyalty apparatus serving presidential preferences. The schedule policy, career regulation, represents the most significant threat to democratic governance since the establishment of the modern civil service system. The 50,000 federal employees who will lose their protections on March 8th are not abstract statistics, but professionals whose expertise ensures that government agencies can fulfill their missions effectively. When epidemiologists at the Centers for Disease Control can be fired for publishing research that contradicts political preferences, when environmental scientists can be dismissed for documenting climate change, when financial regulators can be terminated for investigating corporate misconduct, the government's ability to protect public health, safety, and welfare is fundamentally compromised. The constitutional principle at stake is whether the United States will maintain a government of laws administered by professional civil servants or transform into a personal rule system where government operations serve presidential loyalty rather than public interest. Schedule policy career represents a systematic attempt to eliminate the independent expertise that democratic governance requires while creating a culture of fear and political conformity that makes effective government impossible. The legal challenges to this regulation will determine whether the constitutional separation of powers can survive systematic attempts to politicize government operations. Federal courts must decide whether presidents can unilaterally eliminate civil service protections that Congress established to ensure professional competence in government, or whether democratic governance requires independent institutional checks on presidential power. The implementation timeline reveals concerning elements that demonstrate the administration's awareness of the regulation's controversial nature. Federal agencies have been instructed to prepare internal policies for managing schedule policy career employees, including revised disciplinary procedures that eliminate traditional due process protections. Agency human resources departments are scrambling to identify which positions will be converted, often without clear guidance about criteria distinguishing policy influencing roles from other federal positions. The broader implications for American institutional development cannot be understated. Democratic societies require government institutions that operate according to professional standards rather than political pressure. When civil service systems are systematically undermined, the capacity for effective governance deteriorates, leading to increased corruption, decreased public trust, and ultimately the breakdown of democratic legitimacy. The international community is watching this transformation with concern, as American institutional stability has long served as a model for democratic governance worldwide. When the United States abandons merit-based civil service in favor of political loyalty tests, it provides authoritarian leaders with justification for their own attacks on professional government institutions while undermining America's credibility as a defender of democratic values. The ultimate question facing American democracy is whether citizens will accept the transformation of their government from a professional public service into a personal loyalty apparatus, or whether they will demand the restoration of merit-based civil service that serves constitutional principles rather than political preferences. The answer to this question will determine not only the fate of 50,000 federal employees, but the future of democratic governance in America.